Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the Drobo Broadcast Network. My name is Mario Blandini at Drobo, and today's topic is cloud, and specifically an on-ramp to the cloud for small and medium businesses. We're going to talk about approaches and architectures to using cloud to complement your on-premises storage. And with us to talk about today's subject is special guest Miles Ward, who is a solution architect with the leading name in cloud across the world, Amazon Web Services. How are you doing today, Miles?
Mario, I'm doing great. I really appreciate you and the Drobo customers taking some time with us this morning.
Well, as we go to our abstract here, the latest technology trends, hey, they can be complex and high cost. So people tend to continue doing what they know. They stick to what they have been doing. But there are some new technologies, specifically storage gateway, virtual appliances offerings, that can make cloud storage both easy and it doesn't have to be as costly as you might think from having looked at it in the past. So this episode is going to just talk about some different approaches and architectures to how you can use cloud storage to complement what you have on premises and enable that offsite backup and DR that you're likely looking for but may not be able to do just yet being a smaller organization. So Miles, I'm glad that you're our guest expert today because you've worked in a variety of different sized organizations. So you have a lot of experience in this area. Talk a little bit about what Amazon Web Services offerings are. I think everybody knows who Amazon is, but they may not know AWS.
Sure. Amazon Web Services invented this thing called cloud, and everybody else is sort of playing catch up. We're in the middle of delivering infrastructure as a service, really computing as a utility. So rather than buying and paying up front, you really only pay us for exactly what it is you use when you use it. So really a straightforward way to get real business value from your architecture investment, not just a bill.
And a lot of people might think, what's Drobo caring about this sort of thing? And very clearly, as we go through today's discussion, it's about providing smaller organizations who don't have a second site to do the old-fashioned way of doing offsite backup. They can create the same solution by leveraging a robust service available on the internet, and I think that we'll cover some of the details there very well. In terms of your consummate geekness, I too was in band and went to plenty of band camps, Miles. Trombone player myself. I see you're there with your sousaphone. Tell us a little about some of your technology background and how it's relevant to today's architecture.
Sure. Helped start a couple of different startup businesses. Very participant in the earliest stages, slipping CDs in and installing OS and building up our core infrastructure stack from just a couple of employees to a couple of hundred, and now at Amazon working with some of the biggest businesses in the world as they learn how to deploy and grow infrastructure, not only from a compute standpoint or being able to process through videos or process through other kinds of work, but also storage and very much their high availability and disaster recovery design. So a lot of the stuff that we've seen businesses already know and already hold as best practice, you can extend and complement that stuff at an incredibly lower cost using AWS.
And I think that that's relevant, Miles, as small organizations look to create an architecture which has a lot of the same properties that large organizations do. It's just at a smaller cost structure. And we'll talk about how that can be achieved relative to the technologies that are available today. So I'm looking at offsite backup. I think you yourself have experienced something like this. That picture in the upper right-hand corner is a perfectly good on-site backup. You can back the stuff up on site, and Drobo really does protect those backups as good as anybody else. But that does not protect you from all calamities that might exist. Fire, flood, meteor, and other sort of things. But even power outage could be something that could do that there. Talk to us about what it was like before cloud, because it was complex and people generally didn't take the stuff off site. So there were some downsides.
Sure. At a business that I helped sort of put together the infrastructure for, we had a non-trivial data set, terabytes of really important data that we'd spent quite a bunch of time and money collecting from the internet. And that data set was absolutely destroyed. We came in one morning and saw that a lightning strike had changed the power circuitry in our building, and every one of the little things with the microcontroller had a little of the magic smoke let out. So we went through and had to recover all of that data directly from the web by doing exactly the same work we'd done before. It literally doubled our cost for delivering that project. So we took to heart right away that having a backup that wasn't just logically redundant, but was physically redundant someplace else was a huge part in ensuring the business continuity that we knew that we needed to be able to be successful.
I think one of the elements, Miles, that folks don't appreciate is the amount of time something takes. And we'll talk about that in today's broadcast, that something that's robust and top grade can also be something that's easy. And the time savings are huge, especially the smaller the organization, the more hats that folks wear. Talking about what we have now after cloud, it doesn't replace your on-site backup, but it certainly complements it. And it's stored off-site, which is architecturally where you need it. But how about the automatic operations? I don't think anybody likes doing backups. So how does cloud make that whole architecture easier?
Sure. I mean, there are a couple of core things. One, every single part of our infrastructure is directly connected to the web. So from any place to our cloud, back to your on-premise environment, the access is automatic, is straightforward. All of this stuff is built with an incredible level of redundancy. We'll go through and look at, S3, the system that we're targeting for Drobo to back up to, is designed with 11 nines of durability. That's multiple active copies and multiple active buildings. So that design ensures that your offsite backup is durable, is accessible, is ready to go when you need it, and we can deliver that at an incredibly competitive price point. From an automation standpoint, once you've got a connection over the internet established and you're able to do these backups through the storage gateway, it's literally hands off in comparison to driving back and forth from the offsite escrow facility with your disks like my business used to do, or waiting for the truck to show up to take your tape away, or any of those sort of business impactful delays that add up, that take time, that distract from the real differentiating stuff that your business is off building.
Great segue to our next slide, comparing different approaches. At Drobo, frankly, we're happy you do any sort of offsite backup because you do need that for a truly highly available architecture. The traditional way to do it was be the offsite tape vaulting that you described before, Miles. I myself have done plenty of that in a past life. And those costs can add up. They seem like they're not that expensive, but they do really add up, and the complexity and the service levels you get, frankly, aren't really what people expect today. There's the other approach, replicating everything to a second location. But do you find a lot of the people using Amazon are going to you guys because it's cost prohibitive to stand up an entire second site? Most small businesses don't have two locations, or if they do, they don't have an IT closet or something IT grade to put out there. That could be something that pays for itself quickly because it could cost 5 or 6 figures to get that sort of infrastructure put together.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's certainly a lot of facilities out there that will, rent you some space or rent you some facilities, but really having that being remotely manageable by you. You're not waiting for some dude to answer the ticket to run down the hall and pull your disk out and shove a USB cable on the side of it, or make sure that the robot has enough seats to go get your tape. Every single piece of this infrastructure is available on demand instantaneously from a web console, from our APIs, from our command line interface. So any of these systems, you have to sort of bring into your cost modeling the amount of staff time that it takes to get things done, and worse, the amount of delay time that are just natural processes. My business was absolutely totally tied to our ability to add more hard drives to a very specific machine that needed its disks backed up, and it literally took us 20 days to have that ticket filled. At AWS, if it takes you 20 seconds, I'd be surprised.
Right, it's our whole microwave society here. Everybody wants it now, and that's one of the reasons why the RTOs and RPOs, people are looking a lot more at that. Retrieving a tape from an offsite backup and restoring that is not most people's ideas of a good service level. So cloud backup has a great relevance there, and why we're at Drobo talking about that, because replication historically is too costly for SMBs or departments in a larger company, so cloud backup can be a lot more feasible than that. Let's dig into the details. Looking at the basic architecture, you don't need a lot more stuff than you probably already have on site today. So the servers, the storage, the networking are almost always in place today, so there's nothing to add there per se. You would need in the case of this virtual appliance architecture we're discussing, somewhere on a vSphere server to run the virtual appliance. But generally speaking, folks can find a good place for that without a whole lot of cost. And there is some requisite bandwidth to the cloud required. If someone's on dial-up or they're on very low-grade DSL, this may not be a solution for you. But again, most people, if you're running a business, you probably invested in a path to the internet that has some capacity, and that capacity can be used while you're not using it during the day, overnight, to synchronize your data up into the cloud for offsite backup. So this is the general basic architecture. And we'll talk a little bit about some of these requirements and get your expert opinion, Miles. From a simplicity standpoint, when people think DR and recovery, they think run books, and they think needing to have very specific vertically integrated stacks of hardware and software to go ahead and make those recoveries. And with cloud, that's not necessarily a requirement, is it?
Yeah, not at all. I mean, the storage gateway makes this stuff really, really simple. You're creating virtual hard drives that then are stored on the Drobo. Those virtual hard drives are replicated up to S3 to our storage system. If your local facility fails, if that data center is not available, or your guys' office burns, or any other kind of really terrible disaster happens where that stuff's gone, you literally turn on that virtual machine, that storage gateway in your new environment, attach it to a new piece of storage, and all of those disks after you attach will be available. You start dragging them back down from the cloud. In the same way, you can access those copies of the disks up in the cloud. So say you have a data set that you want to be able to, you just need a couple records out of it to be able to support your disaster recovery effort. You can mount that to a computer that you rent from Amazon by the hour, starting at 8.5 cents an hour. Attach those disks, read through the data, and then turn all that stuff off while you're in the middle of the normal recovery to your new on-site footprint. Very, very easy to use. All three user interfaces, easy to click.
I think the key here is that it's not necessarily radically different than what you're doing today, because in the model we're talking about, Miles, you can integrate with your existing storage, in this case Drobo as the on-site storage. That's a great thing. There's very little disruptiveness in the way the architecture looks locally, but then it will seamlessly get you up into the cloud. In terms of how the data is transferred from your on-premises to the cloud, Amazon doesn't have any throttling or other sort of limitations that you read a lot about from other cloud providers. You can expect the Amazon will consume your inbound data as fast as you can send it, right?
Yeah, we have a couple of these that are running at customers that have what I would characterize as truly non-trivial internet bandwidth. So you can find the outer bound of the storage gateway device. Storage gateway as a virtual machine will run at the maximum only 130 megabits a second.
Is that it?
Yeah, that's it. No, not a big run. And whereas S3, the system that you're writing to, has 762 billion objects in it and is receiving 500,000 plus writes a second steady state. So it is ready to go. Way, way, way bigger than any individual storage gateway. And if you need more than 130 megabits a second upload, you just run another gateway. That creates an additional infrastructure pool that's available through your virtual machines to be able to write up to S3 as fast as you want to go.
That's really great stuff. So let's talk about leveraging cloud backup. People have some concerns, Miles, and I think cost is number one, because historically they haven't been able to monetize what it would be on a price per gigabyte, price per terabyte basis. And the perception is that it's something that a small business can't afford. And we'll talk about the specifics as we put the solution together. But there's also some concerns around dependencies of specific hardware, and then the whole size of the pipe, bandwidth and latency of the WAN, because a small business may not be investing in a pipe to the internet that would be of requisite bandwidth. How do most customers address these concerns? I think from a cost perspective, you pay for only what you use, so there's no need to replicate things Noah's Ark style with like hardware on either side. It's great that the cloud is a consumption-based model. We'll talk about how the storage gateway addresses some of the concerns around hardware-dependent data protection and bandwidth and latency.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, S3 just recently announced, pretty significant storage price drops. So today, on that first gigabyte of data, it's only 12.5 cents a gig to have 11 nines durability, multiple building replicated, web accessible storage. That's not the same as 12 cents a gigabyte for a hard drive. That's a service that's available 24/7 that's actively managed and monitored for data quality. So very, very, very powerful service, very, very high performance service. From a hardware dependency, that's one of the great things about this service is you really can run that virtual machine on just about any box you can find. It has a minimum performance requirement. You need 4 cores and about 8 gigs of memory to serve that. But we don't care which kind of box that is that it runs. You can put it underneath anything. From a bandwidth standpoint, Amazon's built 3 distinct regions. In the United States alone, there are 8 of them available globally, and we'll grow that over time. One of those is going to be closer than any of the others to your office or to your facility. So we have one on the U.S. East Coast in Northern Virginia, one on the West Coast in Northern California, and a brand new one in Oregon that allows similar pricing to the East Coast for our West Coast customers. Whichever one of those that you're closest to, each of them has a full S3 system. So absolutely available as the target and can really reduce the latency of your office communicating into our infrastructure. From a bandwidth standpoint, I won't beat around the bush. You need enough pipe to do your backups. That's just a very normal, very consistent part of any of these solutions. Storage Gateway lets you take best advantage of that because it isn't the kind of thing where you have to push the play button, where you have to say yes, no, start backing up right now. It's going to intelligently use the bandwidth available, so at night, during the weekends, during all those sort of down periods where maybe you're not using as much of your internet connection, it will accelerate the process and use as much of that bandwidth that's available to get your backups up to the cloud real quick.
Let's talk about snapshots, Miles, because unlike tape, which seems like a big, bulky thing, a lot of the daily change rate stuff that you might be doing in a business, particularly the smaller the organization, may not be very big at all. So you can have a lot of protection in the cloud, but the actual data that traverses your site up to S3 may not be very big. In your experience, smaller organizations may even be in the less than 50 gig a day. They could be even at 10 gig a day, right? And that's something that's not too hard to move over most networks.
Yeah, absolutely right. We've seen even smaller than that. So the way that the S3 system and as a result the Storage Gateway virtualization is built, we're really taking incremental copies of only the net new bits. So if you have a terabyte of data and then you go change this Word document and that PowerPoint file and that database file and that email file, it's only those changed pieces and only the changed bits, not the whole file just because you moved sort of one little K around. So very, very efficient, very low overhead, and very, very high performance. The advantage also is each of the individual sort of steps you can configure in the gateway to say, I'd like a specific recovery point in time. I want to be able to get back to this day from a backup standpoint. We'll store each of those incrementally as well so that at any point, if you have a logical fault in your data, you've destroyed some data record, and your Drobo has, dutifully copied down your damaged data, you can restore back the older versions from your S3 backup.
It's great stuff, and I think compared to the old-fashioned way of doing it, folks should be taking a good look at this because just the efficiencies and the level of service and the better service level you can offer in the event of a disaster really makes this something that's compelling. Some of the things that I am impressed with, Miles, around the unique value of Amazon Web Services is the virtual appliance. As a storage vendor at Drobo, we want to make things as simple as possible for our customers, and putting a virtual appliance in between the servers and the storage is something that's a pretty seamless and simple to deploy solution. And Drobo has a how-to guide, which will be on our website, to guide folks through just how easy that is to do. And you've got some cool videos on the Amazon site that talk about how to go ahead and do that. Hey, the pricing is such that it makes premium cloud storage feasible. I'll let you go deeper into how those 11 nines of durability are achieved. You talked about multiple buildings within a region, some of those things. Clearly, Amazon does high availability better than most anybody else because that's one of your core competencies. But the pricing is something that allows you to get premium cloud storage for, as you mentioned, the price of hard drives, which is something that makes it very compelling. Give us a little bit more information about that durability, because I think it's, for some people, they see 11 nines, it's almost an unrealistic number. But that is calculated through some real math.
Yeah, no, it's, I've been at some of the biggest technology businesses in the world, and they look at that and their engineers kind of throw their paper across the table. All right, you guys, this is just marketing. You guys are full of it, whatever. The reality is, at the number of objects that we store, at the size of this data footprint, if we didn't have active evaluation of every single object as rapidly as we do, there's no way to run a service this size. Our reputation is staked on the storage quality that we've put in place. We know people are entrusting their businesses with S3, and rather than take that as the approach of buying the very most expensive stuff, or making sure that the really well-trained guys are standing there at the ready with the screwdrivers, we've solved this problem the way that everybody knows it has to be solved, with very, very intelligent software and very, very rigorous processes that have built not only the definition for how our facilities are designed, how the racks and how the storage is built, and how the network is laid out. All of that stuff follows literally patent-pending innovations at Amazon, and some patent-delivered innovations that make it so that storage is one of our absolute sort of core best practice. So we're excited in the sort of ease of use of that best-in-breed storage, because the virtual appliances, it couldn't be simpler. You probably already have the application servers that are being served iSCSI from a set of storage disks, either direct attached or SAN or NAS. Typically, all that you have to do is just stick this virtual appliance in as a shim, just another little layer to duplicate those writes up to S3 so that it's protected forever.
All right, we'll talk about some of the benefits here on the next slide, Miles, and a question that folks have. Hey, how do I get that big bulk of data up into the cloud in the first place? They may have a low daily change rate, so it makes the ongoing solution quite feasible, but getting the first kind of set of information up there over the hump, so to speak, might take a long time. Certainly you've simplified with the integration, and the restore stuff allows you to rapidly reconstitute. Maybe give us a little information about how you get the stuff on premises up in the cloud in the first place.
Sure, yeah. There's no doubt that when you start this process, if you have an existing primary data set, getting that up into the cloud, is going to take some time. One of the easy things to do to make that a little simpler is to, sort of start at a period where you have a little bit of excess bandwidth. We have some customers who will plan for that month by bumping up their internet plan for a month just to sort of get over the stretch. Maybe there's a situation where you have multiple small office, locations you can write from each of those at the same time. We also have folks that, if you look at the design of the storage underneath, when you provision storage into the storage gateway, you provide the actual data that you're going to be, that's called the sort of, operational storage. There's also a subset called working storage that's a buffer. So you actually fill the working storage, and that's what gets bled down as it writes all that data up to S3. So the slower your network bandwidth, it's important that working storage have enough capacity to support the upload. Another piece, we have a lot of customers that are looking at, figuring out which of their data sets they want to back up first, prioritizing their writes and identifying storage volumes that they want to use the storage gateway for right away because they're business critical, and then over time growing that usage as they've got available bandwidth.
Right. We have the deployment scenarios described in our how-to guide, which is going to be on our AWS page at drobo.com/AWS. The way that Drobo may recommend that you're deploying this as a Drobo customer, if you're using this for Offsite Backup, it implies that you're making a copy of your primary storage to the Drobo as your on-site backup. And most of your restore requests will be serviced from that on-premises storage. Because you're going through the process of writing from your backup to the Drobo, your putting new data onto it, and as long as you're not putting new data onto it at a rate that's too fast for you to get it up to the cloud, you're not starting from scratch, so to speak. So you may have a period in time where your on-premises backups, if you're not doing tape vaulting today anyway, heck, it's not like you're lowering your service level. You can add over time, and from a point going forward, have the offsite backup capability. In the event that you need to have a really big chunk, as you mentioned there, Miles, you can let it synchronize over time, and the alternative would be doing nothing. And most small businesses are in that state today. They're currently doing nothing. So we're looking at architectures that make it feasible. Sure, there's trade-offs, and that's why you're listening to this broadcast, to learn a little bit more about how you can approach the architecture in a way that fits your needs. We feel that cloud can be feasible, and where you may want to invest more, and a lot of people are already doing this, is in their network connection. A lot of people, if they're using their network connection during the day, it's largely idle at night, and you can work out with your service provider the ability to get the bandwidth that you need. So we'd love to talk to you a little bit more about that as you might have some questions. We do live demos at drobo.com/live every day and answer these questions with Drobo pre-sales technical experts available to discuss this further. Let's put it together here, Miles. Cloud backup does require a fair amount of upstream bandwidth. So if I were recommending it to a customer, I might say DS3, OC3, SDSL with a very nice committed bandwidth, or maybe business internet from your cable provider. It's not going to be dial-up or T1. You need to have an Amazon Web Services account. Very easy to get set up. You talk about it taking 10 seconds. It's basically as fast as you can type. That's how fast you can get the stuff on Amazon Web Services. And there's also an option, if you already have that account, to build a low-cost EC2 instance. You talked about cents on the hour for paying for that, Miles. It could be low-cost data movement to get that and bring your application back up in the cloud if that was something you desired. But I think most Drobo customers would be looking to use it purely as the offsite backup and restore some more conventional way, anywhere they want, back to the same site or another. You need VMware vSphere Server, and you got to deploy this virtual appliance based on the minimum specs that Miles suggested earlier. It's documented in our how-to guide, and deploy that storage gateway virtual machine. Then just check which volume on the Drobo you want to protect. And for a lot of folks, if they have a large amount of data on site, they may not protect all of it in the cloud. We'll show you some pricing here on this slide. If you have less than $200 to spend, you can protect as much as 500 gigabytes with that amount of money on a monthly basis, which is quite a lot if you think about most small businesses and their critical data set. If you're looking for bigger bulk, I was surprised, Miles, that you could put 6.5 terabytes of storage in the cloud for less than $1,000 a month. That's quite a lot, and for most small businesses, their offsite backup data set's definitely not going to be any more than that, and you're getting the premium grade cloud storage for that price. This is something that really is more of an economies of scale thing. Because Amazon is the leader in cloud, you can offer these types of solutions at this price. Maybe give us a little information, Miles, about Virtual Appliance and its evolution, how we got here, and why it's such a valuable component for offsite backup for this type of architecture.
Sure. I mean, S3 was really, if you look at the beginning of that service, was really designed to deliver storage for the web. And it's only because of its sort of runaway success that it's become so big and so inexpensive that it's easy to use now for some of these kinds of storage and backup workloads. One of the things that we found different than the obvious sort of web-based use cases is this kind of backup stuff doesn't get done over REST. It's done over iSCSI. It's done as block devices, and S3 doesn't natively expose those kinds of protocols. So we built the storage gateway to make it easy for businesses to be able to use the protocols that they're used to and to operate in a way that was much more familiar. Another part of the pricing on this stuff, I mean, we had plenty of customers that have gotten started with us that were concerned because they didn't want to buy some gigantic VMware footprint just to be able to get started. All the VMware software that's required to get this running is totally free, so there's no extra costs built in there. S3's storage gateway has a charge associated with it. There's a fee to use that piece of software. That's $125 a month after the first 60 days. But that service, in comparison to any of the kind of online software backup products, is hilariously inexpensive. So we really built that at the lowest possible price point to make sure that people could take advantage of the rich service available from S3.
And it's 12.5 cents a gig, basically how you go up from there, which is why for $200, about $75 in charges, you can get up to 500 gig. You can more than 10x that amount of capacity with only going 5x the cost. It's because of the balance between the fixed gateway charge of $125 per month and your actual consumption. And one thing that I talked about with you before, Miles, as we were preparing for the webcast, is paying as you grow. You don't have to forecast in a month that you're going to pay all of that, because you do proration, and you're going to pay only for the stuff that you actually use. So you might have 12 terabytes, which would be the maximum, 12 1 terabyte volumes on a single gateway today. You might have that deployed, but if you don't have them filled up, you're not putting that much data into the cloud. So it is something that's snapshot oriented and efficient. So you do pay as you grow there. From a pricing perspective, most of the time people, they plan for the worst, but it comes in usually less, right?
Yeah, and it's really important. It's pay as you grow and save as you shrink. So let's say, for example, you're doing a bunch of extra work this week, and you've got multiple copies of different data records. You put all that stuff in through the Drobo, it all gets backed up. The next week you delete a bunch of data. You don't need those extra intermediary copies. You reduce footprint. We bill by the gig a month, but we meter by the K an hour. So if you remove stuff this afternoon, you'll stop paying that extra piece up at us. We're really designed with no lock-in, no contract, no upfront fee, none of that stuff, to be able to get the lowest possible price.
Yeah, that's fantastic stuff. And I think so far people can see the value in using a service like this for a offsite backup utility. As we move here to some of the top questions, I kind of covered it already, Miles. For a smaller environment, if they got 5 VMs, less than 100 users, they probably don't need a lot of bandwidth. The bandwidth is going to be proportionate to the amount of daily change rate they have. I think we've already talked about the reliability of the storage in the cloud too, because you really can't build it yourself any more reliable. Now, in terms of backing up everything or having to choose, how do you normally consult with customers here? Because you can pay a little bit more to back up more, you can spend more time and effort kind of separating out what you want to protect. Where's the right balance point, in your opinion, as an architect?
Sure. The big thing that we look at is cost of replacement. So, for my business, we had a really clear measure when we lost, a couple terabytes of active data. We knew that it took us, 200 different machines. We had a clear dollar amount of what that storage cost us to recreate or to recover other ways. So that made it real easy to justify, a couple $1,000s as compared to, 4 guys' staff time and all the sort of work to regenerate that data set. So, in terms of bandwidth, we have plenty of customers that are deploying this, like you said, on sort of business class cable services, things like that. When you get into the sort of steady state day to day of what your business actually changes, and is actually sort of altering, that's going to tend to work just fine. And again, as you look through every sort of additional K that you subtract from the storage is stuff that doesn't have to be uploaded. So, can be really easy to optimize.
I got a question here from the audience about Hyper-V. They understand that the virtual appliance is a VMware virtual machine. Is there a roadmap to providing a similar virtual appliance for Hyper-V?
Sure. We've heard requests for Hyper-V, for Zen, for running on OVM. There are quite a few virtualization managers, and Amazon's always been sort of agnostic to the footprint. We went after VMware first because we heard from customers that that's the place that they needed it most. But we're eager to jump after additional footprints, and I don't think anywhere at Amazon there isn't new feature development and exploration of new platforms. I think the last time I looked at the chart, the current rate is a new feature release every 3 days. So stay tuned.
You can do that in the cloud. A little harder to do with on-premises stuff. Great. Hey, in terms of syncing, we didn't get into a lot of detail of what gets synced, maybe we glossed over it a little bit too much. Basically anything that's on the iSCSI volume that is being presented by the storage gateway appliance, anything on that iSCSI is incrementally then synced to the other side. So if you're putting disk-based backups there, using a backup software, that's what gets synced to the other side. If you have a primary storage there, there's VMDKs on that storage, those are incrementally replicated over to the other side. Are there any gotchas with having the storage gateway front end live virtual machines and live applications and how that's replicated over to the other side, Miles?
No, not really. We have folks that are doing that kind of thing. The difference that you'd see is, let's imagine you set, in your storage environment, you create a 1 terabyte volume and you put, 20 50 gig VMDK virtual machine images inside of there. And those are running active machines. The performance interaction with your local disk is going to work just fine. You shouldn't see a tangible slowdown there. What you will see is every one of the different states of that local disk. So every time you take a snapshot in VMware on the VMDK, every time sort of pieces are altered in that image, you'll see that stuff written as incremental changes to the working space that you assign the storage gateway and then replicated up to AWS. So we've had customers that didn't realize how much that stuff changed and were kind of surprised at the amount of data that they were copying up to S3. So certainly, as you have stuff that's making a bunch of changes you don't want to keep, you'd want to keep that off of there. If there are changes you do want to keep, that's the right place to put it.
And that's one of the reasons why Drobo would recommend that you use this for offsite backup, because you're making a very deliberate point-in-time copy of the critical data set. You're keeping that point-in-time copy using your backup software on a Drobo, and then automatically that's synced to offsite. So you're protected from any calamities that would impact your primary location, but you're not having a lot of change there. Once a backup writes a backup, that tends to be at rest, and it doesn't add to that. When you do your next incremental, sure, that adds on to it incrementally, but then that would be again, another point-in-time sort of file. So it's not something that's radically changing moment by moment. We see that for most Drobo customers as being a feasible use case there. All right, sizing question, Miles. I know you're an architect, so you're great at these type of questions. Scenario, they have 3 virtual machines today using iSCSI. If you look at what a compressed full backup of those 3 VMs are, it's 425 gig. So a fair amount. If you've got 5 up, 5 down fiber, would that be a feasible network for upload into the cloud? It would seem so.
Sure, yeah, I don't see any issue with that. Again, because the first copy that goes over, the moving the 400 gigs up to the cloud, let's say that takes, maybe it's a week, maybe it's a little shy of that, maybe it's a little over. But once those days are done, then it's the individual incremental bitwise changes of the VMDKs themselves. So say, in those virtual machines, you save a bunch of extra documents and you change the records in a database. We look at the blocks, not at the whole object. So it makes it much, much more efficient to send that up to S3. I think you'd be fine.
And as we describe in our how-to guide, you have your working storage there that allows you to have a volume you can flex based on how much buffer you need to get it up to the cloud. For most people, if you're shipping a tape off-site, if it takes a day to move the stuff off-site, it's similar in service level that you might use with a tape vaulting service that comes once a week to take your tapes off-site. So this architecture can leverage some of the stuff that you already have today, and we find that for most metro areas, folks are able to get an adequate network service that can allow them to do a fair amount of backup. Now, if you need to do 10 terabytes, heck, we still see people using Drobos, sneaker netting it, copying it to a Drobo, putting it on a truck or on a plane and moving the data that way. Certainly that's something that we have as a viable solution. But it's something that's manually intensive. And the purpose of today's discussion was to talk about the trends that people are going to. I appreciate you giving us a lot of that insight there, Miles. This solution doesn't have to be complex or even high cost, and specifically the new storage gateway from Amazon Web Services makes that cloud storage for offsite backup a lot more feasible because you implement it non-disruptively into your environment. When I say non-disruptively, very easily integrating it into your environment and taking advantage of the automatic operations. By adopting this architecture, it gives you the flexibility of recovery, and we didn't really even scratch the surface here, Miles. There's lots of cool things you can do restoring to EC2 in the cloud. I think that's just gravy on top of everything, because in the event of a disaster, you'd have that more flexibility, something you wouldn't have going different approaches. So with that, I want to thank everybody for their participation and let you know that there's a 60-day risk-free trial offer. Go to drobo.com/AWS and you can get the how-to guide as well as take advantage of that 60 days for free. That's something anybody can take advantage of, Miles, right? You said the first 2 months of Storage Gateway are free of charge.
That's correct. Yeah, we really want people's early experience to be a positive one, and if there's something wrong between you and us, or if you can't get it to go, we don't want that to be something you're paying for. So we're eager to have people to try this out and really experience the benefits of backup to the cloud.
Fantastic. If you want to get more information about the Amazon Web Services Storage Gateway, I have a link here on the slide that takes you to their blog post. You can also just go read their blog in general at the address provided there, which has a lot of great information. And with that, I thank everybody for tuning in this time. And thanks a lot, Miles. I really appreciate you taking time to talk a little bit more about this exciting new service recently launched from Amazon. I think it's something that if folks hadn't looked at before, they're probably glad they checked in. Thanks again, Miles. I appreciate it.
Hey, Mario. Thank you. And thank everybody for taking the time.
All right, that's going to wrap up today's session. We will see you next time on the Drobo Broadcast Network.